Hey everybody. Thanks for joining our stream. That was a little bit of a little surprise, a little Easter egg at the end of our 60-second countdown.
Welcome to
um,
2022.
right? Welcome to 2022, even though it's 2023.
I kind of did want to do it over again, so yeah.
Right? I don't know. I don't know. 2022, I wasn't bad, but I'm ready for I'm ready to continue down the road.
Yeah, let's
Like
move
as
forward.
the
Yeah, roll
further we get
forward.
right, the further we get away from like, the quarantines and COVID, the better for me. Um anyway, welcome to our live office hours session with the Habitat team. It has been a while. Thank y'all for joining. We missed you guys. Like, I'm sure the community has missed you guys. I have missed hanging out with you guys. Like, it's been a minute. So thank y'all for helping me bring it back. So everyone who has joined the office hour session before has seen these faces, but let's go ahead and introduce the crew. Raul is the engineering manager for the HAB team. Matt and Johnny are also are principal engineers at the HAB team, and so we pretty much got like all of the HAB experts. Well, all of you guys are HAB experts, not all of the HAB experts on the team, but we've got a bunch of knowledge and a bunch of HAB practical use cases here on this call to kind of just, get everybody up to speed. It's been a while. There's a lot to talk about. Well, I do have some questions from the community, but before we dive right in, I'd like to remind viewers to like and subscribe to us on Twitch and YouTube, and also follow us on LinkedIn and Twitter. Um, I'll make sure to put those in the show notes. But by doing that, you guys will stay up to date with all the latest news and events and content related to Chef. Also, don't forget to join our community Slack channel. All of the questions from the community questions that we'll be answering live today are sourced from the office hours channel in the community Slack. So be sure to join that as well. All right, let's jump into questions. Let me present my screen real fast. Looks like we've got some people joining. Thanks for joining, everybody. We're about to get into community questions with the Habitat team. Let me get my screen shared real quick. All right. This community question says, hiya. I've built a package that passed verify locally. Then I uploaded the package to my online builder origin, which was successful. But when I try to promote to stable via the CLI, I get a 404 not found error. This is a Linux build. And as I was working on Windows 11, I used Docker to build the package. If I use the GUI, I can promote to stable. But when I call the package from a Linux box with the supervisor installed, it will not install the package. I've checked my pub and key files, and they're present in the profile cache key directory. Does anybody have any ideas?
Um, so this is probably one of those things where, like, in order to do this true justice, we probably need to have some more back and forth. But what it looks like to me, so he's getting a 404 error when on a couple of things when he's trying to promote from the CLI, and when the supervisor is trying to interact with the depot. He is not getting a 404 error when he's just using the UI in his builder. So, like, I don't want to assume that this is what's happening, but what it looks like what's happening is that he probably doesn't have his CLI or his supervisor pointing to the right builder. And again, like, I apologize if, like, you've checked that a million times and you do have it pointed. I'm just working off of limited information, but based on the symptoms that this is presenting, that's what it sounds like to me, that in your supervisor, you probably don't have your hab builder URL set to your private builder. It might be going to our public builder or to a different builder that's different from the one that you uploaded your package to, and the same thing with the CLI. You can either set that environment variable, or you could use the -- URL or -u argument and pass that along. Obviously, if you're in the UI, you're already logged in to that particular builder. And the thing that's odd, though, is that you are clearly able to upload it to the right builder. So when you did your hab package upload, which I'm assuming is how I don't know how else you would have done it. So yeah, when you did your hab package upload, you must have had your -u parameter or your environment variable set. So I don't know if there was, it could have been days. Sometimes, days could easily have passed between the upload and the promotion. So that's what this looks like to me, is that it's not pointing to the right builder. So again, I apologize if it is pointing to the right builder and there's some other weird thing going on underneath the hood, which is always possible. But that's just, at first glance, that's kind of the obvious thing that stands out to me.
Awesome. The community member who asked this question, if you are watching, feel free to drop a comment, or feel free to follow up with questions in the community chat. Okay.
Yeah, if this is coming from the community Slack, I'll look for this in the community Slack, and I can make the same comment.
Cool. It is. I'll shoot you the link to where it showed up. So cool. Okay, so let me move on to the next question. Thank you for that. Let's see. Okay. All right, second community question. In Habitat, is there a way to completely overwrite the default .toml file? I have a basic config file in package directory, but I also want to overwrite the default .toml file completely with a custom config file, as the config needs more plugins, and this differs on the VM the service is going to run. From the documentation, I could only see that we can override the values from the default config file, but nothing on how to overwrite the file itself.
So there's a couple ways that you can go about this. So clearly, like, the short answer is no. You cannot overwrite the actual, like, because the actual package itself is immutable, and we don't, allow you to like overwrite that default.toml file. There, in terms of overloading or overriding variables, there's a variety of means. There's a user toml that you can use to override any of the variables. There's a have config apply that you can use to override variables at runtime. I did see this question just prior to this to the stream that we're doing now in the Slack, and there was quite a bit of follow-up in the thread, and it looked like what he was trying to do was it's hard to kind of capture in words for this stream because it was rather complicated, but it looks like he's got kind of basically extra settings that he wants to set into his configuration file. And basically the best, like if it was me writing this plan, and if I understand his scenario correctly, which I may very well not, I would write what we would call a wrapper plan. And a wrapper plan is basically, let's say I've got Nginx, and in Nginx, if I could just use the Nginx package, and the Nginx provides me a number of settings that I can override in the Nginx config, and if that all works for me, that's great. But let's say there's certain things in the Nginx config that are not overridable in the Habitat stock Nginx template or package. What I would do then is I would write my own like mroc Nginx package. I would take a dependency on Nginx. I would get in all those, like I wouldn't have to build Nginx. I would get all those built binaries. And then I would supply my own config file, my own default.toml file. So as far as the configuration goes, I can totally take ownership over that. I can copy the ones from the one in core and then fiddle with them. But I think that's probably the best route for this person to go, probably, is to create their own plan, create their own config file and their own default.toml file. And but again, like this is a rather complex scenario. Like I said, the thread kind of goes into some nuances, so I'm not sure if I've and it's also hard to like this, we could do a whole like tutorial webinar on doing that in itself. So it's hard to capture into words, but that's the best I can do.
Okay. Yeah, I think that's a good explanation so far. I definitely think that more conversation can be had in the community Slack, but I think that was a really good high level explanation. Thanks, Matt. So let's look at, we got a couple more. Let's see. Let me present one more time. Two more times. Okay. Back in November, the team launched an experimental feature called Studio List Builds. What exactly are Studio List Builds? How did they work? And what were the findings of that experiment?
I'm going to let Johnny take the first stab at that because he built Studio List Builds. So nobody knows about this more than Johnny.
Sweet.
Yeah. So I'll probably just describe a bit about what Studio List Builds are, and then say a bit more about what we how it panned out. So Studio List Builds, or rather in the documentation you might see it being called as native plan builds. The idea essentially was to do a package build without having a studio environment. So what this means essentially is that your plan files can use any dependency that's available in your host environment, because you're essentially just running it directly on your system. So anything that's available in your environment, your plan can use. You don't have to have it packaged in an existing package or other dependency. And what you can do with that is you can build out your application, and then you can put that into a hard file, which can then be run by a supervisor like every other package. The main things, though, that the caveats being that whichever runtime environment you run it in, it has to have the necessary dependencies. So glibc or maybe any other library that you might be using, like zlib or curl or anything like that, should be available in the server that you're deploying. So it kind of removes that guarantee of Habitat where if you build it and you run it, it will run everywhere exactly the same. That guarantee is not there in a Studioless built plan or a native plan. However, what you do gain with it is the ability to build certain. So it depends on how you build it, right? So you could use a native plan to build a static binary which doesn't have any runtime dependencies, and hence you could deploy applications that otherwise you couldn't do it, because maybe there's no package available in Habitat to build it. Maybe we don't have that particular compiler or some version of a particular language that you need to build it, and you could do that totally using whatever's available on your host, and then build it in such a way that it can run in any runtime environment. How we have personally used Studioless builds, or the advantage it's given us is we've used it to actually create a core set of build tool packages. So the idea essentially that we had was to use Studioless builds to build a set of basic tools that can work within a studio, but we are building them without a studio, right? So it's basically a solution to the classic chicken and egg problem of building a compiler. So to build a compiler, you need a compiler, but how do you get the first compiler, right? So what you do in a Studioless build is you take the compiler, whatever compiler you have, and you build a compiler that will run within a studio, but you build it with your compiler, which is not within a package or inside a studio. And once you have that compiler, you can then go ahead and build another compiler which runs within the studio or do other things, right? So we've actually used this as a kind of foundational block to bootstrap our core set of Habitat packages for ARM, which we will be releasing in the future. But essentially, uh, this was one of the main use cases that we wanted to leverage it for personally within our application, and it's been quite successful at that. We've been able to use it to create uh, a set of packages which don't have any kind of cyclic dependencies, right? So you don't have a GCC compiler requiring a GCC compiler to be built, because the Studioless builds give you like a way out where you can build something that you can't otherwise have built within a studio, and then use that to build more advanced things down the line. So that's kind of what we did with Studio Builds and how they're working, and so far it's been good. It's given us a good way to a new paradigm, in fact, to manage our packages, and we'll be rolling out a lot of changes that are kind of leveraging that in the future.
Awesome. So anybody out there listening, if you are using Studioless builds, come on over to the community Slack and give your feedback to the Hab team, because this is, we definitely want feedback, especially with these experimental features and these, new additions to the tool. So please feel free to go and or to come on over and give your feedback.
And just to be clear, like on the Studioless builds, like that's probably something like that the vast majority of Habitat users are never going to find a use for. Like we largely created it for ourselves. And
okay.
Initially it was for people running ARM because, this provided you a way to create a package in ARM, but mainly for us because like, how do we create like the very first ARM package when there's no ARM Studio? Like somehow we're gonna have to create the ARM Studio. How do we create the ARM, Habitat Studio with no Habitat Studio? So this was like Johnny's genius way of solving that problem. Yeah.
So essentially, what we're gonna talk about after we finish with these community questions are what came out of the Studioless build.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Oh, that's awesome. That's awesome. So I can't wait to get to that. One last question, and then we will get to your demo. Okay. Another question from the community. I have a complex build process and it's causing some errors. Are there any recommended ways or best practices around troubleshooting a build in Habitat?
So like, first there's the obvious, obviously when you're troubleshooting anything, it's like, especially with Habitat, because you could be, like, where is the problem? Is the problem with Habitat? Is the problem just with my build, like with Node or, Ruby or Go or whatever, platform that you're using? So, sometimes this can be a difficult question to pinpoint. But as far as like, if it's a problem that you think that's actually in the plan itself, like with, like, is it hitting this particular, callback function in the plan, or is this particular variable, set right? So there are some things, so these are shell scripts. So for Linux, it's just plain old bash. For PowerShell, it's plain old PowerShell. And so fortunately, those platforms provide tools for you that kind of allow you a way of debugging into the build process. And I'm not sure how to do this publicly. I've got this URL. I just put it into our private chat. Maybe somebody can put it out there. But this really kind of, I think, provides the best kind of step-by-step way for troubleshooting builds both on PowerShell and Bash. So basically, in Bash, there is a command that we expose called attach. And you can put that attach line anywhere in your plan. You can build your plan, and when the thread of execution gets to that attach line, it will stop, create an interactive prompt, and on that interactive prompt, you basically have access to all the variables, the entire environment that particular build is in. Same thing goes for PowerShell, and again, like this is just native to PowerShell. It has this command called set dash. I think it's PS breakpoint, PowerShell breakpoint. So basically, you set a breakpoint in your plan. You can give it a command. So like, let's say you want it to break inside of the invoke build command. So you could say set dash PS breakpoint dash, I think, function, and then space the function name. So it would be invoke dash build. And so as soon as it gets into the invoke dash build point, it stops, and you can look at variables. I think you can also, like, I think there's ways to step through the lines of code. I think so. It's kind of like a DBG, or if you're Ruby, I remember Pry, tools like that, that kind of interactive debugging experience. That can be helpful. But again, check out that link that kind of talks about both the Bash and the PowerShell scenario, and gives some examples for using those.
Sweet. Here's the link on the screen here, and I also put it in the comments. So feel free to check out that link and get more details about troubleshooting your build in Hab. All right. So without
Oh, Rahul's trying to say something.
Yeah, I was just saying that if somebody needs any further assistance, right, with that, they can always reach out to us on community Slack.
Absolutely. Thanks for calling that out, Rahul. Yeah, feel free. Actually, we encourage you to join the community Slack and interact with the team, and also other folks who are using Habitat and on our other products. It's a really great resource for getting some questions answered, and just interacting. And if someone else answers the question, or someone else asks a question that you may have, that's a really good place to kind of get that conversation going. So without further ado, let's get into the demo for the session. So I'm going to remove this from my screen. And Johnny, you're going to be demoing, right? Or
yeah, I'll just share my screen.
So let me remove
Okay. Oh, okay. So I hope everyone can see my screen. So what I'm going to be showing today is uh, a demo of our ARM packages and basically a demo of Habitat working on ARM. So what I'm about to show in this demo is something that you can try out today. It's not yet in an official release, but you can try it out from our, like you can follow the same commands that I'm doing, and it'll essentially use like an acceptance build of Habitat and our acceptance builder, and you can actually try out all the steps and play with an ARM Studio uh, today in Habitat, right? It's not yet officially released, so this is stuff that's still in progress. Uh, but yeah, it's something that I'll show you guys how to work with and how to use today. So I'm currently on an ARM machine, and I'll just run the uname command so we can see that. Let me just make my text. I hope this is a lot clearer now. So as you can see, we are on an AR64 machine, a Linux machine. And what I'm about to do is I'm going to run this all inside a Docker container. So it's kind of reproducible and you can do the same commands. So I'm basically going to do a Docker run. Dash dash rm is just to clear up the container once I'm done with it. Dash it is to get an interactive session. Privilege is so that I am able to mount volume. So I need that primarily for running a Habitat chroot studio inside the Docker container. So we're going to be running a chroot studio, not a Docker studio. And I'm exposing the 8000 port onto my machine so that the app, so I'm going to be showing the Node app so that we can view that in the browser. I'm running an Ubuntu image and I'm going to be executing bash on it, right? So I'll go ahead and do that. So there we go. We are inside the container, and I'll just do another uname here so we can see that we are still inside an ARM machine. And I'll just go ahead and do some standard updates and installs of basic tools that you need to get Habitat installed and running on your system. So it's basically just git curl vim for me to do some file editing, and sudo because sudo is not installed by default, though I don't really need it, but I keep it here so that the instructions are more or less the same. So now we've got all of that installed. I am now going to clone out the, so we have a sample node app, and this is something that's available on GitHub. It's basically a simple node-based application that is packaged with Habitat. And if you see here, we have our basic application files, and inside the Habitat folder, we have the configuration and the plan file. So what I'm going to do just before I proceed any further is open up the plan file, and I'm just going to change out this origin to the demo origin. And now what I'm about to do is, so the next things I'm going to do are quite important for this to work out if you're trying this out today. So the first thing that we do is we set the Habitat builder URL to https builder.acceptance.habitat.sh. The reason we do this is because the ARM packages are not yet officially released on Builder. These are still in the process of development. We're still making some tweaks, fixing some things up before we make a public release. But they're still available for testing over here on this URL. So I'm going to export that. And the next thing I'm going to do is I'm just going to export the HAB license environment variable. So this will just make sure that I don't have to accept the license additionally when I start up the studio. After that, what I'm going to do is I'm going to install Habitat. So this is using the curl bash installation script that we have. There are some small tweaks that I've done here. Namely, the most important tweak is that I pass in these additional arguments -v, and I'm picking a very specific version because this is the version that currently will work in acceptance. if you try any other version, or if you forget to pass in this parameter, this installation script will possibly fail, right? So right now, this is the exact version that you must use, and it's the only one that will succeed. So I'm going to do a curl install, and this is now downloaded Habitat. It's installed Hab as a package and bin linked it. Now what I will do is I'll just run a Hab setup, and I'll just say, no, I don't want to connect to a builder instance. I do want to set up a default origin. I'm going to make that demo. So this matches the same origin that I put in the plan file. And I do want to create an origin key for demo so I can sign my packages with it. I don't want to set up a default builder access token. So, and I don't need a gateway secret. So that's it. So my setup is now complete. Now what I will do is I will enter Studio. So I do Hab Studio enter. And you can see it starts downloading all the packages required for Studio. If you notice in the names, it mentions it's downloading it for the AR64 Linux platform. So these are all ARM packages. These are not the default x86 packages that are being downloaded here, right? And it's installing all of the, so these are, it's installing all basically the core packages that we have by default available within a Studio environment. And there we go. We are now inside a Studio. And oops, sorry, if I do an ls, you can see that it's mounted the code folder inside it. And I am now going to run the build command, and it starts doing the build, right? So it downloads Node, downloads all the dependencies of Node, and then it's going to do an npm install and build our sample app. So the app is built. It's doing some post-build cleanup work, creating our tarball, and there we go, right? So the plan has built successfully, and it is now available within this particular path as an artifact. So what I'm going to do now is I'll just run SL, which will give me a log of the supervisor. So you can see the supervisor was started inside the Studio, and you can see the log for the supervisor out here. And what I'm going to do now is I'm going to do a Hab service status. So I can see that there are no services loaded. And I'm going to do a Hab service load demo / sample node app. And what this is going to do is this is going to load up the application that we just built. And you can see that it's here, it's running. And I'm running this all in VS Code. So I have essentially forwarded my port on my remote machine to my localhost address. And I'm just going to open that up and just put that on the screen. So there we go, right? So localhost 8000, we have the sample node app running. Now what I'm going to do is, so just so that we know that it is, this particular service itself that's running, I'll just do SL again, and you can see the logs from the sample node app coming here. It's recompiled all the hooks, created the config files, initialized the service, and started it, right? And if I do a Hab svc unload demo sample node app, it stops the node app. And if I go back to my browser and I try to reload it, it will essentially fail, right? So that's pretty much it for the demo. This is how you can download and install Hab on an ARM machine. Download the packages we have. about 200 odd packages to 270. Most of the core Node, Rust, Python, many of the standard packages are available. You can try them out, run your own plan on an ARM machine with these instructions that I showed, and give it a whirl. So all of these packages, the way we built them also, like I mentioned earlier, was it was done with the native plans. So we have a certain set of native plans that we use to bootstrap the core set of tools, and then we bootstrap the entire AMP packages on top of those core set of tools. And we will essentially in future be using the same kind of process for our x86 platform as well, because it gives us a very uh, easy to understand build graph, which is not cyclic in nature, and is very easy to update and change, and hopefully it'll help us speed up uh, our ability to add and update plans in the future. So that's pretty much it for the demo.
Nice. Uh,
Just to add, that was great, Johnny. And one thing, just to be clear, for if anyone's wondering, so if you have an ARM system, like we demoed this through the Docker instance, through the Docker run, just for convenience. Like it's a great way to just like try this and then like blow away that Docker container. But like, let's say you want to just like spin up an EC2 instance of of Linux, an AR64 Linux instance on EC2, you can totally just do it in there, without Docker at all. You could just do it, by that same curl bash, pulling down, it'll just know that you're on ARM. It'll pull down the right habitat version for ARM. Again, just like what Johnny was showing, making sure that you use that specific version number and you set your hab builder URL to our acceptance environment. But you could just do a hab package build, and then that'll just enter a studio, right there on that EC2 instance, or whatever instance that's ARM. And you can do a hab super run, and it'll pull down the ARM supervisor, and it'll just work.
It'll just work.
Yeah. Of course, now that I've said that, it won't. That'll be something. But so.
Yeah.
Nothing just
Well, I
works.
love the confidence.
Yeah. Like again, like this is not supported. There's no, we have no official documentation yet.
Okay.
There's some people that we're working with. So like if this is something that's like super interesting to you, and you're a customer, definitely talk to your support staff, your chef support people, and we can talk. But we haven't nailed down a date yet. But at some time in the future, we'll definitely be going much more official, and there'll be documentation, and this will all be up on the official builder site and all that. So
Awesome. And another shameless plug, join the community Slack to stay abreast of what's going on. So like, I'm sure when this feature does go live, we'll have an office hour session about it, but you'll probably learn about it sooner if you are if you've joined our community Slack. So definitely do that. All right. So are there any other things that we need to touch on from the team before we wrap this session up? I mean, we've talked about community, we've gone over community questions, we've had a demo. Any closing thoughts before we wrap up for this session?
No, I think great job for the team, right? It was a quick demo, but it to get to this point, there were like hundreds and thousands of hours of effort which went away, right? So
For sure.
just want to call out
Absolutely.
that, and yeah.
Yeah, so kudos to the team. I mean, and then considering that, like it took multiple different pieces to even create this part of the puzzle. Yeah, that definitely goes to show, You guys have been working. You guys have definitely been on it. So much kudos to you all, and thank you. From the community, thank you for continuing to produce great tools. Awesome. Well, thank you guys again for coming and sharing with us. We will be back on in 5 weeks for another Habitat Office Hours session. Don't forget to like and subscribe to our Twitch stream and also our YouTube channel. And follow us on LinkedIn. If you guys are watching on LinkedIn, I just realized that LinkedIn comments don't come through, and the comments that we put in the comment channel here don't push to LinkedIn. So I'll keep a better eye on, on LinkedIn comments. We didn't have any come through today, but it's a good call out. And follow us on Twitter, at Chef on Twitter. Like, you'll get it's another tool for you to stay abreast on what's going on at Chef. So without further ado, I guess we'll let everybody get to the rest of their day. And thank you guys. Thanks, Hab team. And we'll see you again in 5 weeks.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. Bye.
Thank you.
All
Bye-bye.
right. Thanks. Bye.